Welcome to the music space station where we can examine human music with a bit of distance. Is harmony just a matter of rhythm, but like very fast?
That nature can't do without rhythm.
Harmony is a good example of the concept of emergence, which happens when something has properties or behaviors that its parts do not have on their own. For example, life is an emergent property of chemistry and physics. In the same way, musical intervals are an emergent property of polyrhythms. In my last video, we explored the idea that harmonics are simply multiples of a fundamental frequency. In this video, we'll look at the different rhythmic patterns that emerge as we mix and match these different harmonics. So practically, when a string is plucked, the string is going to be vibrating at a certain speed, which is the fundamental tone that you're hearing. But it's also going to be vibrating twice as fast, 3 times as fast, 4 times as fast. And the poor string is trying to combine all these movements in some kind of weird hula hoop. What this means is that we can establish a pretty straightforward connection between intervals and rhythms. If your fundamental tone is a low C, then you can get the octave above by vibrating twice as fast, just like playing half notes over a whole note. If you want to produce a G out of the same string, you need to vibrate 3 times as fast, just like playing half note triplets over this whole note. Now, if you want to compare this G to the C immediately below it, the pattern of vibration that you're going to get is that of 3 on 2, which is the first and most obvious of polyrhythms. We'll get to the next C by vibrating 4 times faster, and if we compare this C to the G immediately below it, you'll get a vibration pattern of 4 on 3, which is like the level 2 polyrhythm, used a bunch in electronic music and EDM. You get an E by playing quintuplets over this whole note or vibrating 5 times faster. If you want to compare this E to the C right below it, you'll end up with a 5 on 4 rhythmic pattern, which is not as hard as it seems. By the way, I'm going to include a section at the end of this video for how to play polyrhythms in an actual piano piece, if you struggle with that. But for now, we'll head over to the analysis room. Amazing, so we have some live footage here of our most recent expedition. After many years of research, we finally managed to find a solar system that perfectly matches the harmonic series, which is to say that every planet's orbital rate is a direct multiple of the farthest one. It's a very nice proof of concept for Pythagoras' notion of harmony of the spheres. Amazing, so let's have a quick look at the different use cases that humans have found for these polyrhythms across history. When you take a polyrhythm and you make it the basis of an entire piece, what you get is a cross rhythm. In traditional sub-Saharan music traditions, cross rhythm is really a generating principle. The meter is in a permanent state of contradiction. Although the two cycles do not share equal status. The binary cycle is the main rhythm, whereas the ternary cycle is secondary. Which makes sense because the dancer's feet, of which there are 2, are going to be marking the main rhythm, while the secondary rhythm is going to be accented musically. According to musicologist David Peñalosa, playing cross beats while being fully grounded in the main beats prepares one for maintaining a life purpose while dealing with life's challenges. Neoclassical music, which is a pretty vague umbrella term that covers composers like Jan Tiersen, Ludovico Einaudi, Hanya Rani, and the like, has been very interested in this pattern. I'll quickly show an example of my own piece, Rhétorique, composed a few years ago, in which the right hand operates in 3 and the left hand in 2. The name that Pythagoras would have used to talk about this phenomenon would have been hemiola, which comes from the Greek hemiolos, meaning containing 1.5, or 1.5 to 1, which is basically our 3 on 2 ratio. The name was first used to describe relations of pitch, namely the perfect fifth. Starting in the 15th century, though, the same name started to be applied to describe rhythmic relationships, where there are 3 beats of equal value in the time normally occupied by 2, or 3 measures of equal value in the time normally occupied by 2. Often the form that this is going to take in classical music is that you'll have some kind of waltz, and suddenly you'll have 2 measures where the metric will feel like 2/4. So you're kind of speeding up the feel by a ratio of 1.5 by dividing 2 3-beat measures into 3 2-beat measures. Sometimes you'll even see the editor change the bar line to a dashed bar line to make the emiola more obvious. So because your ear is used to the 3-beat pattern, your brain is going to feel some kind of ghost accentuation on the first beat of the second measure of the emiola, which will result in some kind of 3-on-2 feel. This could be classified as a horizontal polyrhythm because you're not hearing both cycles at the same time, but rather one after the other, just like in this cliche of Latin American and Spanish music, which alternates 2 3-beat patterns with 3 2-beat patterns. Oh, hey, how are you doing? Sorry, the architecture space station just passed us by. Later on, composers of the Romantic era started using more and more complex polyrhythms in their music, such as Chopin's ultra-famous Fantaisie impromptue in C-sharp minor, where the right hand plays patterns of 4 notes over a 3-note accompaniment in the left hand, which in sonic terms would be the equivalent of a perfect fourth. Then, Rachmaninoff's Prelude in A major number 9 features a 5-on-3 polyrhythm. Again, I just want to emphasize that not only is this ratio analogous to the ratio that would produce a major sixth in the harmonic series, it is a major sixth. Like, there's nothing more to a major sixth than this rhythm, except maybe timbre considerations. And then Stravinsky used a 6-on-5 polyrhythm in his Quatre Etudes Opus 7. But recently it seems that classical composers have not been so keen on superimposing different subdivisions of the same beat. Rather, if you look at neoclassical music today, the fancy thing to do is not polyrhythms, but polymeters, which is kind of the same thing, but also not exactly the same thing, but also kind of the same thing. Basically, you take a fast rhythm, like 16th notes, for instance, and for the right hand, you're going to be writing patterns of 4 notes, whereas in the left hand, you're going to be writing patterns of 3 notes, which results in a fun texture because all the notes are synchronized, so you have stability, but you also have instability because the starting points of the patterns don't match. I have trouble completely differentiating this concept from polyrhythms like others have done, because to me it's basically just a zoomed out polyrhythm where all the micro divisions have been filled. If you zoom out, you still get this 4-on-3 pattern, it's just that every note is played. Interestingly, the length of this whole 4-on-3 pattern does not match the length of a normal 4/4 measure. So when you get to the end of the measure, you need to add a filler of a quarter note so that the pattern can repeat starting on the next measure. You can also extend the pattern over 2 measures, and then you're going to have to add 2 quarter notes at the end, or 2 beats of filler, before you can start again. Or you can Radiohead your way out of that problem and just keep it going forever and advienne que pourra, just like in the beautiful Weird Fishes. So let's get into the practicality of how to actually play this polyrhythm in a piano piece. I'm teaching this method to all my students, and they're all doing fine. Well, most of them. First, learn the basic clapping rhythm. Don't think too much about it. Just go on YouTube and find someone to teach you the 3-on-2 pattern. Then transfer to 2 different notes on the piano. Then differentiate the notes in one hand. Then differentiate the notes in the other hand as well. Notice that in any of these polyrhythms, there will always be a point where the 2 cycles come back together for a synchronized note. Then, that is very important, count 1 cycle out loud. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Then learn to count the other 1 too, and that's probably the hardest part. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. And finally, which is the part that most people never look at, is that you don't know whether you're going to be entering this rhythm from 8th notes or from triplets. So you need to be able to do both. So 1, 2, 1, 2, or 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So you need to learn to get into this pattern from the first rhythm as a reference and also from the second rhythm as a reference. And then you're ready to transfer to the actual notes of your piece and make it fluid. So we'll do the 10 steps with the 4-on-3 pattern. So learn the basic pattern, transfer to 2 different notes on the piano, differentiate the notes in one hand, differentiate the notes in the other hand, Then count one cycle out loud. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Count the other one out loud. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Also, it's good to practice switching freely between one and the other. And finally, learn to get into this pattern from the 4-beat pattern. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then 1, 2, 3. And then transfer to the actual notes of your piece. Here we're going to use the Fantaisie Impromptue as an example. As you go through these steps, you'll develop a mental image and a feeling for which notes in the pattern are closer to other notes. And by listening to one cycle and then changing your listening to the other one and going freely between the two, you'll be able to even out the rhythms and make them as regular as possible. Thank you for watching, and see you soon in orbit.